Record. There we go. Okay. This week's Parsha is the double Parsha of Vayakheil Pikkudei. It is also the fourth of the special Shabbatot. It is the Parsha of, it's called the special mafter of Parsha HaChodesh. I'm not going to do a Parsha HaChodesh, but if you go back to the Parsha class on Parshas Bo, which should be on my should be up online. So then it was the one that was entitled "We Follow the Moon, or We Considered Lunatics." So there I deal with the whole concept of Rosh Chodesh, the whole concept of the moon, and you can get a picture of that of the mafter. Okay, in this week's parsha in Vayakheil and Pikkudei, these are the fourth and fifth parshos that deal with the building of the Mishkan. The first two, Truma and Tetzaveh, those deal with the building of the Mishkan, the commandment that God gave to Moshe. And in this parsha, we deal with Moshe giving the commandment to Bezalel and to the Jewish nation, and of the actual building. And then in the end of the parsha is the accounting that Moshe Rabbeinu gave for every single thing that he collected. He gave what's called the words escape me, excuse me, but he's giving it a full-on accounting of exactly what he took in. And one of the reasons is because even though Moshe Rabbeinu was the giant that he was and was the incredible leader that he was, leadership always comes with its own problems and issues. And there were people that suspected Moshe Rabbeinu. They would stand behind him and they would say, "You notice EPC is getting a little heavy. He must be living off of that money that we gave him for those donations. You know, he just redid his kitchen. I wonder where he got that money from." And they were suspecting Moshe Rabbeinu of doing something illegal and something that wasn't right, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu gave an accounting for every single thing that he collected. Okay, in this whole discussion of Moshe Rabbeinu getting ready, of the Jewish people getting ready to build, the Torah tells us, chapter 35, verse 21, Vayavo kol ish asher neso libo. Every person whose heart lifted him, whose heart inspired him, v'chol asher, and every person that was nodva rucho, whose spirit motivated him. Now, in the simple understanding, that's talking about the same person. Kol ish asher neso libo, and any person who was nadav rucho, that's people that were moved. They were the ones that brought everything. The Ramban points out that there is a difference between a nediv leiv and a person who was nasa libo, and a person who was nodav rucho. And the Ramban says as follows. The Ramban says that the people that were doing the malacha, so then those are the people that we call that were neso libo, that inspired their heart. And about the people who would do the actual work, that we call them those that were inspired, their hearts inspired them, because we don't find on the misnadvim, we don't find about the people who brought donations the concept of nesius leiv. The concept of nesius leiv, of the lifting of the heart, that was specifically on the people that were doing the building. The nodva rucho, the people whose spirit motivated them, those were the ones who made the donations. And the reason, says the Ramban, why the nesa'u libo, why those that were inspired of heart, so then those were the ones who were the doers of the malacha. And here the Ramban says something amazing. He says, Ki lo hayo bahem shelamed es hamalacha se'elam me'melamed. Nobody who was doing the building learned from in an art school. Bezalel the art school hadn't yet been dedicated. There was nobody that had an art teacher. In Mitzrayim, they weren't doing chugim of art, right? Moms weren't taking their kids to go into and to learn how to draw. No, there was no preparation. There was no learning or anybody that even trained his hands in this. There was no time for that. They were building buildings. They were putting up buildings that kept collapsing. They were working with mud and bricks. They weren't doing any kind of fine art. They weren't doing anything special at all. Aval matza b'tiv'oi sheyeda lasos. But that there were people that perceived on their own nature that they knew how to perform such skilled work. V'yigbe libo b'darchei Hashem, and his heart was elevated in the ways of God. Lavai lifnei Moshe, to go in front of Moshe and say to Moshe, Ani ese kol asher andoni dover, I will do everything that you tell me to do. This is, in fact, based in a Ramban earlier in Shmos, in Parshas Truma, where the Ramban says that there was nobody that knew how to do anything. When it says Rei Karasi B'Shem, even B'Tzalel, God said, I called him by name, meaning that I filled B'Tzalel with this wisdom because he didn't get it from Mitzrayim. All he knew was bricks. And therefore, to know, and B'Tzalel also knew the Razei Olam, he knew the secrets of the world. B'Tzalel knew how to put letters together, how to put material together, and to make it almost glow spiritually. For all of that, is that with all of that B'Tzalel was going to accomplish, and that the builders were going to accomplish, what is it, says the Ramban, needed to be their basis? Vayigba libo, that their hearts had to be lifted, b'darchei Hashem. Lavai lifnei Moshe, to stand in front of Moshe and say, whatever needs to be done, that's what I'm going to do. And that's why the Torah describes them as the people, asher naso libo, that their hearts were lifted up, because their hearts were lifted up because they wanted to use anything that was inside of them. They wanted to be able to use it and to dedicate it for God. And once they had that nesius lev, once they had that lifting up of the heart, that dedication of the heart, so then it was possible for them to find in their nature, in their hands, the ability to be able to do this. You know, there's an incredible Gemara in Brachas, that the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan teaches us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not give wisdom except to people that are wise. And where do we know that from? Because it says, Yahav Chachmasa L'Chachimim. It says in the pasuk that God will give wisdom to the wise people. So the Talmud says that another rabbi says, wait a second, we learn it from a different place. Where do we learn it from? We learn it from this Parsha, where the Torah says that ubelev kol chacham lev, in the heart of all those that were wise of heart, nasati chachma, I gave wisdom. V'asu es kol asher tzivisicha, and they have done everything that you commanded. So what's amazing, first of all, is why do we need to have two places that we learn it from? We learn it from Yahav Chachmasa L'Chachimim, God gives wisdom to the wise, and from the pasuk Ubelev Kol Chacham Lev, in the heart of every person who is a wise person. That's why I've given Chachma, I've given wisdom to. Because the first is teaching me about regular Chachma, regular wisdom. And the second is even wisdom, which is purely a matnas chinam, a gift from God, not based on any raw material or anything. It's really just coming from a nesius leiv. It's coming from a desire to dedicate. So then that person, that kind of wisdom still only goes to a person who is a chacham leiv. Okay, what we have established is that this nesius libo that the Torah is talking about, any person who is nasa libo, whose heart motivated him, that person was considered a chacham. He was considered what was called later in the Torah a chacham leiv. So question number one is, Where does that original nesius lev, that original chachma, that original wisdom, where does that come from? Where does it begin in a person? And second, why are we calling a person a chacham lev? Why are we calling a person a chacham moach, a chacham rosh, a wise person in the head, a thinker, not a chacham lev? What does the heart have to do with it? The Talmud tells us, the Torah tells us, and the Talmud elaborates that when a Talmud Chacham, a Torah scholar, goes to a city of refuge, so then his Rebbe goes with him. When a person goes to a city of refuge, his Rebbe goes along with him. As it says in the Torah, Hu Yonus el Achas Ha'arim, he goes to one of the cities, Vayakheil, and he will live. And the commentaries say, V'chaye ba'alei chachma, the life of a person of wisdom is that there should be wisdom, because without wisdom, below Talmud, it's like a person who is dead, which means that a person to be alive person has to desire chachma. So much so that if we want this person to live, if he goes into exile, we got to send his Rebbe with him, because he can't live without it. Because the basis of life has to be a desire to learn from life. That's a chachma slave. That's a person who is called wise of heart. Chachmas, a she'ifa for chachma, a desire for chachma, an aspiration for chachma. That's the original chachma that a person has to have. A person has to have an aspiration to be a chacham. What do you want to accomplish in your lifetime? I want to amass wisdom. I want to acquire wisdom. I want to understand what the Ribbono Shel Olam wants from me. I want to understand how to live like a mensch in this world. I want to understand how to be a better human being. That's called chachmas lev. That's called nisa'o libo. Gava libo b'darchei Hashem, that a person desires just nothing else other than attaching themselves to God. And that's the first wisdom. There's a story that the Talmud tells about a certain Roman matron that she asked Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. She said, why does it say, Yav chachmas alechachimim? Why does God give wisdom to the wise? It would be better spent on the stupid. In other words, if you're looking for somebody to give a little wisdom to, give it to the idiots, right? Give it to the people that don't have anything. Let them have a little chachma. The guys that already have chachma, they'll get more chachma. But the ones that have nothing, why wouldn't you give it to them? So he tells her a mashal. And he says, two people come to you to borrow money. One of them is a very, very wealthy person, but strapped for cash. The other person is a person who was a very wealthy person, but now has squandered their money and they squandered their fortunes and has nothing. Both of them at the moment don't have a nickel to their name. Which one of them are you going to lend money to? So she said, of course, you're going to lend money to the one that's got a portfolio. If he can't pay you back, he'll cash in or liquidate something, and this way he'll be able to pay you. He really does have money, just doesn't have cash right now. That would be a better investment. So Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta looks at this lady and says, that's exactly why God gives chachma to the wise. Because the ones that are not so wise, they've squandered any chachma that God's given to them. God will give them more chachma. They'll use it to build bombs. They'll use it to figure out ways to cheat people. They'll use it in ways to harm other people. But a wise person, a person who's already shown themselves to be a chacham lev, a person who already has that she'ifa, that desire to learn and to grow, that's the person who you want to invest your money in. Because that person is going to take that wisdom, take those brains, and they're going to use that for something incredible. We say in the Mishnah, Ezehu Chachma, who is a wise person? halomed mikol adam, a person who learns from everyone. There is the most, we learned this Mishnah together. There is the most amazing commentary by the Rabbeinu Yonah, which I've often mentioned, but quickly. The Rabbeinu Yonah says as follows. He says that what is the essence of Chachma? The essence of Chachma, the essence of wisdom, is loving wisdom. Says a person, the Chachmei Umos, ki ayodea kol hachachmos, that they know everything. If they don't love wisdom itself, then eino chacham ela tipeshu. He is not a wise person, he's a tipesh. He can know every theorem. He can come up with blackboards filled with mathematical equations. But if he's not in love with learning and deepening his understanding, then he is not a chacham. He is a tipesh, acher she'eno oev hachachma, because he doesn't love wisdom. Acha oev osa, the person who loves wisdom, umisave eleha, and desires it, seeks it, aspires to it, then af al pi she'eno yodea klum. If I said this, I'd be called an apostate. The Rabbeinu Yonah says it, that even though he knows absolutely nothing, harei ze nikra chacham, that's a wise person. Sha'al kol panim tasig es chachma, he will be able to acquire his wisdom, chachma emitis, because he's got the basis. He's got the first step. And the first step is love of learning. That's what it means to be a lomed mikol adam, somebody who learns from everybody, a person who just loves learning, a person who can't get enough, but not because it just intellectually stimulates them, but because it enhances their lives, it builds them up. That's the people that the Torah are talking to. Vayavo kol ish asher nesau libo. Every person whose heart lifted him, meaning every person who had a chochmas halev. Chochmas halev is not chochma in the brains. Chochmas halev is the wisdom of the heart, that the heart knows how valuable this is. The heart knows how important this is. And when a person has chochmas halev, then God is going to give chochma l'chachimim. He'll give more wisdom to those people. As it says in the Parsha, that God gave wisdom to those that had chochmas halev, not chochmas brains, chochmas halev, because that's the first step to acquiring chochma. You meet a lot of people, incredible. I actually had to describe somebody last night for a shidduch, and somebody asked me about the person, and I said, "Mamish, a lovely person, wonderful, wonderful person. I happen to like them a lot, but I would describe them as a person who was very wise." And the person said to me, "Oh, also like with common sense?" I said, "No, very wise." In other words, the person has tremendous, a big brain, very, very, very smart, but not necessarily so perceptive, not necessarily engaged with the heart, more engaged with the brain. We meet people like that, even in Judaism, that there are people that their connection to things is a very cerebral connection, and the heart seems to lag behind. What the Torah is telling us in this week's Parsha, that to build a Mishkan, to build a house for God, to build something that is filled with Kedusha and with holiness, it doesn't say a thing about the brain. It doesn't say a thing about an ability to be able to make mathematical calculations, to be able to figure out building practices, to be able to know architecture. That's not what these people were known for. They had one quality, and that was Kol Ish Asher Nisa'u Libo. You know, it talks about the women later, and it talks about the women that were able to spin wool right off of the body of an animal, of a sheep. Normally, we shear the sheep. then we clean the wool, then we comb the wool, and only then after all of those processes of preparation do we then go and and make the wool. The women had this ability to be able to take it straight from the sheep. And again, you have to ask the same question. Where did they get that knowledge from? It's not like they were hanging with sheep in Mitzrayim. It wasn't like they were working for Burlington Coat Factory. I mean, they had no idea how to do any of these things. They had every idea how to do it because they had a desire. And once you have a desire, then the chachma, the wisdom, will come to you. We say about many Torah scholars that they have incredible knowledge of math and science. Where do they get their knowledge of math and science? So they say about the Gra that he used to read in the bathroom. He used to read books on math and science. Shkoich, I just can't imagine, right? Unless unless he went in the way of most men, that he sat, a half hour too long each time when he went to the bathroom. I just can't imagine that he picked up all that knowledge from merely reading a little magazine, Popular Science in the year 1750. I just can't imagine that that's what would make him a wise person. What filled his head with all of this knowledge was he had a desire for this knowledge. And when you have a desire for this knowledge, Kadosh Baruch Hu gives Chachma l'chachimim. He gives wisdom to the wise. We can do many things that we can't imagine that we can do. We could accomplish and understand many things that we can't imagine that we could accomplish and that we could understand if we have the ratzon, if we have the desire and the will. When it comes to giving money, then for the money to be able to do what it needs to do, it has to be nod varucho. It's got to come from the spirit. It's got to come from a desire to want to give it. And when it comes to knowledge and understanding and artisanry and all of that, it's got to come from a place called Nesao Libo, from a great desire, a tshuka, an aspiration, pining away for that knowledge and understanding. And when you pine away for it, so then it comes into the head. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is nasan chachma l'chachimim, he gives wisdom to the wise. Okay, that's my thought. To build this Mishkan, to build this entity, to build this incredible thing, it doesn't take skill, it takes desire. And that's no different in our own worlds. That if we want to build beautiful worlds for ourselves, it takes not skill, but it takes desire. And once you have desire, the skill falls into place. Okay. Oh, somebody's commenting. Oh, good Shabbos all. Yes, my sentiments exactly. Good Shabbos to everyone. Everyone should have a beautiful, wonderful, and meaningful Shabbos. Correct, Adam. That Mishlei is filled with the concept. When it talks about wisdom, it talks about wisdom of the heart. Because we think that wisdom is in the brain. It is geographically located there, but it has to be from the heart. There has to be the ratzon in order to make the wisdom successful. Okay, everybody should have a beautiful, wonderful, amazing Shabbos. And
Good Shabbos.
We'll see everybody on Sunday.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yishar Koach.
And a happy Rosh Chodesh. Sunday is Rosh
Thank
Chodesh.
you, everyone.
Oh.
Right.
So this Shabbos is Shabbos Mevarchim.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good